The bitter rivalry between India and Pakistan is a direct legacy of the 1947 partition of British India. This momentous event, intended to create separate nations for Hindus and Muslims, instead birthed a conflict that has festered for over 7 decades. The core of this persistent antagonism lies in the disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir. At the time of partition, the princely state of Kashmir, with its Muslim-majority population but Hindu ruler, faced a difficult choice. Its eventual accession to India under controversial circumstances was immediately contested by Pakistan, leading to the First Indo-Pakistani War in 1947-48. This initial conflict set a dangerous precedent for the future. The Kashmir issue is not merely a territorial dispute, it is deeply intertwined with national identity and ideology in both countries. For India, Kashmir's inclusion is a testament to its secular credentials, a region where diverse communities can coexist. For Pakistan, the K in its name is often said to stand for Kashmir, and its predominantly Muslim population makes it, in their view, a natural part of Pakistan, an unfinished agenda of the partition. This fundamental disagreement has been the primary driver of instability in South Asia, making the line of control, the de facto border dividing Kashmir, one of the most militarized and dangerous frontiers in the world today. Over the years, the dispute has led to several full-scale wars, notably in 1965 and 1971, and a significant high-altitude conflict in Kargil in 1999. Beyond these major confrontations, a near-constant state of low-intensity conflict, cross-border shelling, and support for insurgent groups has characterized the relationship. The presence of a long-standing separatist insurgency in Indian-administered Kashmir, often with alleged backing from elements within Pakistan, has resulted in tens of thousands of deaths and widespread human rights concerns. This volatile mix ensures that Kashmir remains a flashpoint, capable of drawing both nuclear-armed states into wider conflagrations with minimal warning. The international community has repeatedly called for a peaceful resolution, yet a lasting solution remains elusive. Numerous rounds of bilateral talks and third-party mediation attempts have failed to break the deadlock. Each side remains entrenched in its position, unwilling to make concessions that could be perceived as a betrayal of national interest or historical claims. The unresolved status of Kashmir, therefore, continues to cast a long, dark shadow over the subcontinent, ensuring that any spark, whether a terrorist attack or a political miscalculation, carries the risk of escalating into a major conflict, as was tragically witnessed in early 2024. The early months of 2024 saw a dramatic and terrifying escalation in tensions between India and Pakistan, culminating in a full-scale war. While the underlying causes were rooted in decades of mistrust and the unresolved Kashmir dispute, the immediate trigger was a devastating terrorist attack. This attack occurred in Indian-administered Kashmir, a region already simmering with unrest and heavy military presence. The scale and audacity of the assault, targeting Indian security forces and civilians, sent shockwaves across India and immediately raised the spectre of retaliation. This was not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of violence that has plagued the region for years. India was swift to attribute responsibility for the attack to Pakistan-based militant groups. New Delhi presented what it claimed was compelling evidence of cross-border support and planning, accusing Islamabad of continuing its long-standing policy of using proxies to wage an asymmetric war. The Indian government, facing immense domestic pressure to act decisively, issued strong condemnations and vowed a robust response. The rhetoric from political leaders and media outlets on both sides quickly became heated, further inflaming public opinion and narrowing the space for diplomatic maneuver. The familiar cycle of accusation and counter-accusation began, pushing the two nations closer to the brink. Pakistan, as anticipated, vehemently denied any official involvement in the terrorist attack. Islamabad condemned the act of violence but rejected India's allegations as baseless propaganda designed to tarnish Pakistan's image and deflect from India's own internal issues in Kashmir. Pakistani officials suggested that the attack could be the work of indigenous Kashmiri groups or even a false flag operation. This denial, however, did little to assuage Indian anger or international concerns. The credibility gap between the two nations, already vast, widened further, making any form of constructive dialogue nearly impossible in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy. The situation deteriorated rapidly. As diplomatic channels failed to provide any de-escalation, both countries began to mobilize their armed forces along the international border and the line of control. The movement of troops, tanks, and artillery pieces was reported extensively, creating an atmosphere of impending war. The international community watched with growing alarm, aware of the catastrophic potential of a conflict between two nuclear-armed states. Despite urgent calls for restraint from global powers, the momentum towards war seemed unstoppable, driven by domestic political compulsions and a deep-seated historical animosity that the terrorist attack had brought to a boiling point. In the tense weeks following the early 2024 terrorist attack, the international community made several attempts to mediate and encourage de-escalation. Key global players, including the United Nations, the United States, and China, expressed grave concern over the escalating situation. They urged both India and Pakistan to exercise maximum restraint and engage in direct dialogue to resolve their differences peacefully. However, these diplomatic overtures proved largely ineffective. The deep-seated mistrust and the intensity of public anger in India, coupled with Pakistan's staunch denials, created an environment where diplomacy struggled to gain any traction. Both nations appeared to be on a collision course. India, feeling itself the aggrieved party, insisted that Pakistan take credible and verifiable action against the militant groups operating from its soil before any meaningful dialogue could resume. New Delhi argued that past diplomatic efforts had been exploited by Pakistan to buy time while continuing its support for terrorism. This stance, while understandable from an Indian perspective, left little room for immediate diplomatic engagement. Pakistan, on the other hand, called for dialogue but simultaneously maintained its innocence regarding the specific attack, offering counter-proposals such as joint investigations, which India viewed with skepticism based on previous experiences. The failure of established diplomatic mechanisms highlighted a critical weakness in the regional security architecture. Bilateral communication channels, already strained, broke down almost completely. Back-channel diplomacy, which had sometimes helped to diffuse tensions in the past, also appeared unable to bridge the chasm of suspicion. The rhetoric emanating from both capitals became increasingly bellicose, further complicating any potential peace initiatives. Leaders on both sides seemed to be playing to their domestic audiences, making concessions or even conciliatory gestures politically unpalatable, if not impossible, in the charged atmosphere of the time. Ultimately, the window for a peaceful resolution closed. The diplomatic efforts, though well-intentioned, were perhaps too little, too late, or simply unable to overcome the weight of historical grievances and the immediate fury sparked by the terrorist attack. The failure of diplomacy meant that the decision-making calculus shifted decisively towards military options. As diplomatic avenues exhausted themselves without yielding any positive outcome, the drums of war grew louder, and the subcontinent braced itself for the inevitable outbreak of hostilities. The path to war, paved with anger and failed negotiations, was now clear. When the conflict erupted in early 2024, India brought to bear a formidable array of military hardware, reflecting its significant investment in modernizing its armed forces over the preceding decades. The Indian Air Force played a crucial role, deploying its most advanced fighter jets. These included the French-made Dassault Rafale multi-role fighters, known for their agility and sophisticated weapons systems. Alongside the Rafales, the Russian-origin Sukhoi Su-30 MKI, a mainstay of the Indian Air Force, provided air superiority and deep penetration strike capabilities. The older but upgraded Mirage 2000 jets, which had proven their worth in previous conflicts like Kargil, were also utilized for precision strikes. In terms of ground attack capabilities and missile systems, India showcased a diverse and potent arsenal. The BrahMos supersonic cruise missile, a joint venture between India and Russia, was a key asset, capable of striking high-value targets with incredible speed and precision from land, sea and air platforms. India also possessed a range of ballistic missiles, including the Agni series, which provide strategic deterrence but also have conventional variants for battlefield use. These missiles, designed for various ranges, underscored India's capacity to target locations deep within enemy territory, adding a significant dimension to its offensive capabilities during the war. Drone technology formed another critical component of India's military operations. The country deployed its indigenously developed DRDO Rustam series of medium-altitude, long-endurance drones for surveillance, reconnaissance, and intelligence gathering. These domestic systems were complemented by imported technology, most notably the American MQ-9 Reaper drones. While primarily used for surveillance and target acquisition in this conflict, the potential for these advanced drones to carry out armed strikes added another layer to India's operational flexibility, allowing for persistent monitoring of the battlefield and engagement of time-sensitive targets. Beyond air power and missiles, the Indian Army's ground forces were equipped with modern T-90 main battle tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and a variety of artillery systems, including self-propelled howitzers and multi-barrel rocket launchers. The Indian Navy maintained a strong presence in the Arabian Sea, ensuring maritime security and readiness for any seaborne threats. This comprehensive military capability allowed India to engage Pakistan on multiple fronts, leveraging its technological advantages and numerical strength in certain areas, though the conflict would prove challenging for both sides despite their advanced weaponry. Section 5. Pakistan's response, a look at its defense capabilities. Pakistan, in response to India's military actions, mobilized its own significant defense capabilities, determined to counter the perceived aggression and protect its territorial integrity. The Pakistan Air Force, or PAF, was central to its defensive strategy, relying on a mix of aircraft to challenge Indian air operations. The JF-17 Thunder, a multi-role fighter jet co-developed with China, formed the backbone of the PAF's fleet and was extensively deployed. These were supplemented by American-supplied F-16 Fighting Falcons, which, despite some operational restrictions, remained among Pakistan's most capable aircraft, particularly for air-to-air combat and precision strike missions. Older Mirage 3 and 5 aircraft also played their part. Similar to India, Pakistan possessed a credible arsenal of missiles. Its strategic and tactical missile program includes the Shaheen series and Ghaznavi series of ballistic missiles. These systems are capable of carrying both conventional and nuclear warheads, forming a crucial part of Pakistan's deterrence posture. During the 2024 conflict, these conventionally armed missiles were readied and, in some instances, reportedly used to target Indian military assets and forward positions. The development of these indigenous missile systems has long been a priority for Pakistan, aimed at maintaining a strategic balance in the region, particularly given India's larger conventional forces. Pakistan also made significant use of unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, for reconnaissance and combat operations. The indigenously produced Barak drone, capable of carrying laser-guided missiles, was deployed for surveillance and targeted strikes against Indian positions. Additionally, Pakistan operated Chinese-made Wing Lung drones, which offer similar capabilities for reconnaissance and combat missions. The proliferation of drone technology on both sides of the conflict demonstrated a new dimension of modern warfare in South Asia, allowing for persistent surveillance and precision attacks without risking piloted aircraft in heavily defended areas. On the ground, the Pakistan Army relied on its Al-Khalit and T-80UD main battle tanks, armored personnel carriers, and a range of artillery and air defense systems. Pakistan's military doctrine emphasizes a strategy of credible minimum deterrence and full-spectrum deterrence, reflecting its aim to counter India's conventional superiority through a combination of conventional forces, sub-conventional warfare capabilities, and its nuclear arsenal. During the 2024 war, Pakistani forces engaged Indian troops robustly along the line of control and the international border, demonstrating their preparedness and resolve in the face of a determined adversary. Section 6. The human cost, civilian suffering and displacement. The India-Pakistan War of 2024, though relatively short, inflicted a terrible toll on civilian populations residing on both sides of the border. The indiscriminate nature of shelling and aerial bombardments in populated areas led to tragic loss of innocent lives. Homes, schools and hospitals were not spared from the ravages of war, as communities living near the line of control and international border found themselves on the front lines. The constant fear of bombardment forced many families to abandon their homes and seek shelter in safer areas, leading to significant internal displacement and a humanitarian crisis that strained local resources and aid agencies. In Indian-administered Kashmir and the border districts of Punjab and Rajasthan, thousands of civilians were caught in the crossfire. Villages were evacuated, often at short notice, as artillery duels intensified. The disruption to daily life was immense. Livelihoods were destroyed, education was interrupted, and access to essential services like healthcare became severely limited. Reports emerged of families separated in the chaos, and the psychological trauma inflicted upon survivors, especially children, will undoubtedly have long-lasting effects. The constant threat of violence created an atmosphere of pervasive fear and uncertainty for those who remained or were unable to leave their homes. Similarly, in Pakistan, civilian areas in Azad Kashmir and border regions of Punjab and Sindh experienced significant suffering. Pakistani civilians faced the same dangers from shelling and airstrikes, resulting in casualties and displacement. The infrastructure in these areas, often less developed, suffered considerable damage, further exacerbating the plight of the local population. The war disrupted agricultural activities, which are vital for many rural communities, leading to food shortages and economic hardship. International aid organizations face considerable challenges in accessing affected areas to provide much-needed humanitarian assistance due to the ongoing hostilities and security concerns. The narrative of war often focuses on military strategy and territorial gains, but the true cost is most profoundly felt by the civilians whose lives are upended by violence. The 2024 conflict was no exception. Beyond the immediate casualties, the war left behind a legacy of destroyed communities, shattered lives, and a deepening sense of bitterness and loss among the affected populations. The long-term consequences of this displacement and suffering will continue to resonate in the region, making the prospects for lasting peace and reconciliation even more challenging for generations to come. Section 7. Counting the fallen military casualties on both sides. The 2024 war between India and Pakistan resulted in significant military casualties on both sides, a grim testament to the intensity of the fighting. According to figures that emerged in the aftermath, India reportedly lost approximately 5,000 military personnel. These losses were incurred across various services, the Army, Air Force, and paramilitary forces operating along the border. The casualties included soldiers killed in direct ground engagements, pilots lost during aerial combat or to anti-aircraft fire, and personnel who succumbed to injuries sustained in artillery barrages and missile strikes. Each death represented a profound loss for the families and a blow to the morale of the units involved. Pakistan also suffered heavy military losses during the conflict. Estimates indicated that around 4,500 Pakistani military personnel were killed. These casualties were similarly distributed across the Army, Air Force, and other security forces engaged in the war. The fighting along the heavily fortified line of control was particularly brutal, with both sides engaging in fierce battles for strategic positions. Air defense systems on both sides claimed multiple enemy aircraft, contributing to the loss of highly trained pilots and expensive military hardware. The high number of military fatalities underscored the serious nature of the confrontation and the risks both nations took. The nature of modern warfare, with its precision-guided munitions and advanced surveillance capabilities, meant that military installations and troop concentrations were prime targets. This contributed to the high casualty rates among military personnel. Both India and Pakistan possess well-trained and professional armies, and soldiers on both sides fought with courage and determination, often in difficult terrain and under extreme conditions. The loss of experienced officers and soldiers is not just a numerical figure, but represents a significant depletion of human capital and expertise within the respective armed forces, which takes years to replace. Beyond the immediate fatalities, many more soldiers on both sides sustained serious injuries, leading to long-term disabilities. The provision of medical care for the wounded, often in challenging battlefield conditions, was a major undertaking. The psychological impact on the surviving soldiers who witnessed the horrors of intense combat is another aspect of the military cost that is difficult to quantify but nonetheless significant. The war served as a stark reminder of the human price of armed conflict, even when fought with sophisticated weaponry, and the sacrifices made by military personnel in the line of duty. Section 8. The Scars of War, Infrastructure Damage and Economic Impact. The 2024 India-Pakistan War inflicted substantial damage on infrastructure in both countries, particularly in the border regions that bore the brunt of the fighting. Military installations, including air bases, communication centers and supply depots, were deliberately targeted by both sides using missiles and aerial bombardment. This resulted in considerable destruction of valuable military assets. However, the damage was not confined to military targets. Civilian infrastructure such as roads, bridges, power lines and communication networks also suffered extensive harm, either as collateral damage or through direct targeting in some instances, severely hampering daily life and economic activity. In India, the border states witnessed significant destruction. Key infrastructure, including transportation links crucial for both civilian and military movement, was damaged, requiring extensive and costly repairs. The disruption to power supply and communication networks affected not only the immediate border areas, but also had ripple effects on regional economies. The cost of rebuilding this damaged infrastructure placed an additional burden on the national exchequer, diverting funds that could have been used for development projects. The economic impact was also felt in sectors like tourism and agriculture, which are vital for many communities in the affected regions. Pakistan faced a similar plight, with its key military installations and civilian infrastructure in border areas sustaining considerable damage. The targeting of infrastructure aimed to cripple the enemy's war-making capability, but inevitably impacted the civilian population. The destruction of roads and bridges impeded the movement of goods and people, while damage to power facilities led to prolonged outages. The economic cost of the war for Pakistan was substantial, exacerbating existing financial pressures. The resources required for reconstruction and rehabilitation were immense, further straining an economy already facing challenges before the outbreak of hostilities. Beyond the direct costs of rebuilding, the war had broader negative economic consequences for both nations. Investor confidence was shaken, leading to capital flight and a downturn in stock markets. Defense budgets, already substantial, were expected to increase further to replenish depleted stocks of ammunition and replace lost equipment. Trade between the two countries, already minimal, ceased entirely, and the conflict disrupted regional trade routes. The overall economic impact served as a stark reminder that the costs of war extend far beyond the battlefield, affecting national development and the well-being of citizens for years to come. Section 9. An uneasy truce, the ceasefire and lingering questions. The India-Pakistan War of early 2024 eventually ground to a halt, not through a decisive military victory for either side, but as a result of intense international pressure and the realization of the potentially catastrophic consequences of continued fighting. The conflict essentially ended in a stalemate. Both India and Pakistan claimed successes and inflicted significant damage on the other, but neither was able to achieve its overarching strategic objectives. The spectre of nuclear escalation, ever present in South Asian conflicts, played a crucial role in compelling the international community, particularly major powers like the United States, China, and the United Nations, to intervene forcefully. A ceasefire agreement was eventually brokered following urgent diplomatic interventions. This agreement brought an end to the active hostilities, silencing the guns along the border and the line of control. However, it was an uneasy truce, laden with suspicion and unresolved grievances. The ceasefire primarily aimed to stop the bloodshed and prevent further escalation, but it did not address the underlying political issues that had led to the war in the first place. Both countries returned to their pre-war positions, with the territorial status quo largely unchanged, leaving a bitter taste of a costly yet inconclusive conflict. In the aftermath of the war, there were renewed diplomatic efforts to encourage dialogue and build confidence between India and Pakistan. However, the deep-seated animosity, further exacerbated by the recent conflict and the heavy losses sustained, made substantive progress difficult. The core issue of Kashmir, the primary catalyst for decades of conflict, remained stubbornly unresolved. India maintained its position that Kashmir is an integral part, while Pakistan continued to advocate for self-determination for the Kashmiri people. The war merely added another layer of resentment and mistrust to an already complex and fraught relationship. The 2024 war served as yet another tragic reminder of the volatility of the India-Pakistan dynamic. While the ceasefire held, the situation remained tense, with the potential for future flare-ups dangerously high. The unresolved status of Kashmir continues to be the principal source of instability, ensuring that the cycle of conflict followed by fragile peace is likely to persist, until a lasting political solution to this core dispute is found. The people of the subcontinent will continue to live under the shadow of potential war, with each new crisis carrying the risk of an even greater catastrophe.